Hello everyone, so in today's video I'm going to be showing you how to customize a Breyer horse with pastels. So this is part 2 of my 2-part series of customizing a Breyer horse, and I'm going to be showing you how I do all the painted details. So first I'm going to be using acrylic paint for all the painted details, and you want to make sure it is very watered down. That is the most important part, because you don't want it to be all globby and streaky and see your brush marks, so you want it to be really watered down. So I am starting with the socks, which are extremely straightforward. You just paint the whole foot basically up to as high as you want your socks to be, and then I paint down and use it as a primer coat for the hooves, so I painted all the hooves completely white as well. But you just need to basically paint the whole leg up until where you want the socks to end. It's not very hard to do, and if it's uneven at the top, it's fine. So then for the white markings, it's pretty much the same idea. Sometimes I like to, if I don't really have an idea or if I'm doing a lot of white markings, I like to use a pencil to just sketch out where I want the markings to be. Or sometimes I freehand it. It's up to you, whatever makes you feel more comfortable. But just trying to make sure the edges are a little bit wonky and a little bit uneven, because otherwise it's going to be extremely smooth, which is usually not the case for things like this. And then for the face, I decided I was going to do a bald face, or at least like a partially bald face. One eye ends up being blue and one is brown, so that way I could show you how I paint both of them. So you can see I'm painting down, I'm covering almost one whole half of the face, which was also the half that I wasn't as happy with. So I just used the white markings to kind of cover that all up. So basically, the white markings can easily save you. If you are a beginner, I would highly recommend a paint or a Pinto, because you can cover up any mistakes or areas that you don't really like with the white markings. So if you happen to make a mistake while you're painting and you don't like that area, once it's kind of dry, it's better to do it while it's wet, but sometimes, as long as it's only one coat underneath, dry can work too. Just take a Q-tip and some water and you can easily wipe it all away, especially if it's already wet. Don't use nail polish remover, because you'll remove all the sealant and pastel underneath, and then you have an even bigger problem on your hands. So just wipe away with water the wet paint. And if it's dry, you can use your fingernail or maybe like a toothpick or something to gently scrape it away, and then it should be fine. And then I continued this one over the mane, and part of the mane ends up being white, and I did the tail white as well. So you can see I'm adding another coat, and you just want to keep adding very watered down coats. Obviously, if you water it down too much, your paint is going to get extremely runny. So that's not a good thing, because it'll run everywhere you don't want it to go, but you just want to keep adding pretty watered down coats until it is opaque. So next we're going to be adding a little bit of detail to this paint. So in order to add a bit more depth to these stark white markings, I'm going to be using this cream color pastel as well as a very, very light brown color. So I started by adding a little bit of color to the feathering on her legs, because if you've ever seen a horse, you know that the feathering on the legs is pretty dirty, because it's always touching the ground. So I added it around the hooves here and then at the back of her leg. And I'm using this cream and then a light brown. And you can see the difference here. I went back and added a little bit more afterwards, but you kind of just want to add a little bit of color to it just to make it look a little less white. Not too much, and you don't want it all over, because then it's going to look faded, like you didn't even get completely white paint. But you want to add it to certain areas, like here I added it around the base of the tail, and of course under the tail. And then I also added it, obviously, to every leg. I added it to the feathering, and then the feathering on top of the hooves. a little bit around the mane and on each white marking, just kind of around the edges. And not much on the face, just a little bit, but I wanted to make her nose pink. So I used pastels in brown, cream, and just a little bit of actual pink to make her nose pink, so that way she'd have a little pink nose. So then, after that was all finished, I sprayed her again because I wanted to seal in that pastel. And then I painted the tail a base coat of white. I also painted the mane white where it was going to be white, and then I painted the other part a black color, but not completely black. I used a more of a pretty dark gray color. So then I used the same pastels that I was using earlier to tint the tail. I ended up going a little bit heavy on this, so it's a little bit more brown than I intended, but I really do think it turned out pretty well, and I would definitely make sure to make the tip of the tail a kind of dirty looking color. Obviously you don't want it to look filthy, but horses are naturally a little bit dirty, obviously. They live outside, so making their markings and tails and manes a little bit dirty looking, at least me personally, I think it adds to the realism. So this is what I ended up getting for the tail. And then for the nose, I just painted in the nostrils. I used a dark gray to just paint in the nostrils. So then for the mane, I took a really dark black color. This isn't completely black, it's a very dark gray color. And I just rubbed that onto the mane to add a little bit of definition and tried to make it black because of course it's supposed to be black, but I wanted to start with a lighter gray. So then I used a pale tannish cream color for the hooves. And then I was careful not to paint on any of the fur around the hooves. And then to add a little bit of detail, I took a brown pastel and rubbed it along the edge of the hoof, underneath, and then a little bit up the sides. So that way it would add a little bit more color. So it looks more like this. You can see the front ones have been pasteled and the back ones have not. So now I'm starting on the eye. So make sure, no matter what color you're doing the eye, to paint it a base coat of white, because obviously it's supposed to be white. And then I decided to add a little tear duct. You don't have to do this, but I just took a creamish pink color and then added it to the inner corner of the eye. And it's okay if you brush it onto the white, it'll be covered. So I'm going to show you how I do the brown eye first, and to do that I take a dark brown color, mine is burnt umber, and I paint in the iris. So depending how surprised or scared or calm your horse is will change the size of the iris, or how much, not really the size of the iris, but just how much white is showing. So I wanted to give her a pretty calm expression, so I just kind of left a little bit of white near the back corner of the eye, so that way it's not all brown, but most of it is colored in because I wanted her to be pretty calm. So just take your time and try to follow the natural curve of the model. So then you want to do the pupil. So a horse's pupil is kind of a horizontal rectangle, it's not circular. Basically painting a horizontal rectangle to begin with, but then you are going to start blending out the edges. So you can see it looks a little stark right now, but what you need to do is take a little bit of brown and then use that to mix with the black and then just kind of blend out the edges. I use little dabbing motions to add little dabs of brown on there and then just kind of mix it together. Just make it look a little less like a stark black pupil on top of a plain brown background. And then I added just a little bit more black right on top to just kind of make sure that it had the right shape and everything. And then I took a darker brown color and brushed a little line right underneath the lid to add a bit of shadow. And then I used a highlight much closer to the pupil with a lighter brown color. Then this is where I add just a little bit more black on the pupil to make sure it isn't all blended in, because of course the middle part needs to be black. And then finally I add a little white dot for a highlight and a shine. And I think that makes the whole thing just come alive. So that is how I do brown eyes. I found them to be easier just because black kind of matches with brown a little bit better, so if you make a mistake on the black pupil, it just automatically kind of morphs with the brown a little more anyway, so it's a lot easier. And blue eyes I've always had a problem with, so start with a base coat of light blue, and then I do pretty much the same thing. It's just a lot more work to get the black to mix with the blue without turning everything gray and muddy. So I painted in the rectangular pupil, and then you can see I speed up the footage a little bit, but I just take my blue and start dabbing it a little bit, but that turns everything to be more gray. So then I had to go in with some more black and just try to make it black again, not blue, and I used a little bit of white to try to mix it all together. So just go back and forth a little bit, it eventually works. So that's pretty much what I ended up with, and then I added a dark blue streak just underneath the eyelid to make a shadow, and then a little bit lighter blue. You can barely see it because the camera didn't pick up it too well, but it is a tiny bit lighter, just add a bit of highlight, and then finally a white dot to add a shine. So I took a high gloss Mod Podge to add a dimension to the eye, and it's okay if the layer is kind of thick because you also it'll also protect it, so you don't want it to scrape off. So that is it. This is my finished horse. And that's pretty much it for the video. So I hope you enjoyed, and I hope it taught you a thing or two, or helped you at least. I think she turned out pretty good, nice in the end. If anything, she's at least better than she used to look. And I hope you enjoyed the video and found it helpful. So I will see you all in the next video. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.